But the windfall tax on energy profits, you look at some of the costs that are being endured by ordinary people, 54% increases on the energy price cap, which means it's gone from 1,971 to a forecast in October of 2,800. And that 1,971 is the new figure. So you're looking at a 40% rise. I told you we should talk about maths more. I've already got myself in a bit of a... So you're talking about a 40% rise on top of the 54% rise that we've already had. That's astonishing, right? And then you look at the numbers that these firms are posting. You look at the size of the profits that companies like BP and Shell are posting. And, it's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it? It really is. Emmanuel Macron's re-election in France recently had energy policy at the very heart of his electoral campaign. He was going to be the first major nation to abandon gas, oil and coal, and they forced the majority state-owned electricity supplier, EDF Energy, to lower costs. That's the same operator that's behind the Hinkley Point B nuclear power plant in the UK. It's taking an £8.4 billion hit from the price cap, which forced it to lower the cost of electricity below the market rate. Other countries have done similar things. We'll run through them at some point today. I'll say that again. Other countries have done similar things. I think the ideological thing that we have to really lance this morning is the idea that you can't... This is why I mentioned the free marketeer from yesterday's show. It reminded me a little bit, and I feel a bit guilty having a swing at someone when they're not here to defend themselves, but it was just funny, that's all. It just made me laugh to move without noticing from stating very confidently, I am a free marketeer, to saying 10 seconds later, if my sector doesn't get help from the government soon, I don't know what's going to happen. You can't be both. You can't want state intervention in your business in order to protect your business while simultaneously calling yourself a free marketeer, which is best understood as somebody who doesn't believe the state should interfere in your business. You take it to vampiric levels when you start getting the so-called think tanks involved, all the Tufton Street Herberts who won't tell you who pay their bills, but pop up on telly and radio all the time. Say, oh no, you can't interfere with profits. You can't interfere with business. The market will regulate itself. Which is, to my mind, and I am prepared to be wrong this morning, or not wrong, because I'm not wrong on this one. I know that I'm right, but I'm prepared to be educated. I'm prepared to know more about it by 11 o'clock than I do now. There is no real defence of the idea that what you do to have a well-ordered society is let the people with the most run everything. The whole role of government, I would have thought, is to put some sort of checks and balances upon the rapacious pursuit of profit. There's nothing wrong with the pursuit of profit, quite the opposite, in fact. The pursuit of profit is human nature. It's like the pursuit of warmth or food or sex. It drives humanity, the pursuit of profit, the pursuit of comfort, the pursuit of reward. But as with warmth and food and sex, some people pursue it too much. Some people are, if you like, addicted to pursuing it. Some people are rapacious in their pursuit of profit. And the shareholder culture, the economy that we have in this country, more than even some other Western countries, it almost canonizes greed. It almost fetishizes the rapacious pursuit of profit. There was a good phrase, wasn't there, a few years ago? It was something capitalism. I've forgotten what it was, but it was a little adjective before the word capitalism. And then of course what the liars and the vampires do is pretend that you're opposed to capitalism when you're not. You're just opposed to excessive, exploitative, rapacious capitalism. The idea that capital, i.e. wealth, should be in charge of everything. Now, if you happen to own a newspaper or a couple of television stations, you're in a wonderful position, aren't you? Because not only are you capital, but you also have power. So you can use the power of owning your television stations and your newspapers to protect your capital, which is how ordinary people end up thinking that it's against their interests to want to see a little bit of dilution of capital and a little bit of redistribution of epic wealth or capital, ergo capitalism. Are you still with me at the back? So when you have people who can't turn their heating on, what's the phrase you've taken away from this programme the most? For me, it's indoor coats, I think, in recent years. And it's not the most shocking conversation we've had. We've heard from people who are really at the end of their tether. We've heard from people going without food. We've heard from some of the 2 million people who skip a meal for a whole day in order to keep the wolf from the door. We've heard from older people in particular who were sitting there on the sofa watching television with blankets, cooking on gas barbecues because they'd calculated that was going to be cheaper. Not older people, this family. Father just last week cooking on a gas barbecue because he'd calculated that the bottled stuff was a little bit cheaper than the stuff being piped into his house by these energy companies. But the phrase that really resonated with me was indoor coats. Indoor coats. Toxic capitalism was the phrase. Thank you, Anthony. Toxic capitalism. I've got a real problem with toxic capitalism. Oh, he hates capitalism, he does. He's a communist. Imagine you said that. I've got a real problem with toxic waste. Oh, he hates waste, he does. He hates all rubbish bins. I've got a real problem with toxic people. Oh, O'Brien hates people. Listen to him slagging off toxic people. No, I hate toxic people. I don't hate people. I don't hate anyone. But if I did, well, no, I don't. I currently hate anyone. Rather good news this morning. I'm very much at one with the universe. So imagine if I said to you, I really hate toxic people. And then someone wrote an editorial in The Spectator saying, these people hate people. It's toxic capitalism I've got a problem with. It's toxic people I've got a problem with. Toxic food. I don't think you should be eating toxic food. Oh, listen to these anti-food woke snowflakes. It's toxic. I said toxic food. Food's great. I love food. Just don't eat toxic food. Down with... And then it pops up in a Daily Mail editorial saying these they hate food. So toxic capitalism. And it's not even going to be permanent. It's not even going to be... like the new natural order of things. It's going to be a one-off. That's why it's called a windfall tax. A windfall. So, I've got two questions for you this morning. What do you think the ideological reasons are? Because they may be a little bit more sophisticated, they may be a little bit more nuanced, they may be a little bit more... compelling than the one I've offered up. The ideological reasons that are driving number 10 to resist pressure for a windfall tax are, from where I'm sitting, a fear of telling massive companies, a fear of telling capital, a fear of telling wealth that they've got to cut their cloth a bit. It's astonishing how this kind of politician, very much in the ascendancy at the moment, it's astonishing how this kind of politician is perfectly comfortable standing up, for example, in the House of Commons and telling people that they don't need food banks, they just need cookery lessons, or popping up on the telly telling Kay Burley that that people just need to get a better paid job or work extra hours. So they'll tell you how to live your life. They'll tell you what you need to do. But they are absolutely terrified of telling companies that are shelling it, companies that are raking in the kind of sums that look like telephone numbers to normal people. They're perfectly, supremely comfortable telling some poor soul over there who's got an indoor coat that they should have cookery lessons or find a better job or work extra hours, or use the value range of food. So just think for a minute. We've stumbled across something here again, haven't we? That's it, isn't it? That's the dichotomy at the heart of these ideologies. So what is acceptable behaviour? Acceptable behaviour is telling people who can't afford to feed themselves that they should perhaps consider buying value range products in their local supermarket, finding a better job, working extra hours, or taking some cookery lessons, because there's not really any such thing as poverty, and if there is, you deserve it. Right? You deserve to be poor. It's your own fault for being thick, for not knowing about the value range food, for not knowing how to cook, how to roast the chicken, for not having the wherewithal to realise that you can just walk out the door now and get a much better paid job than the one you've currently got before you can say, what a load of cobblers. Right? That is the ideology, because that goes hand in hand with the argument that here's a company making several gazillion pounds in profit, largely as a result of the increase in wholesale energy prices. They're just harvesting it. They're just shoveling money into the coffers of shareholders. But we can't touch them. We absolutely can't go near them. Look, if we go near them, they might move. Do you remember when Paul Daniels, the late magician, and various other people that said that if Labour get in, I'm going to emigrate? None of them ever did, as far as I'm aware. This is similar, isn't it? No. We can tell desperate people exactly what, that we can patronise them till the cows come home. But we can't tell massive companies what to do. We can't tell people paying their bosses tens, 20s, millions of pounds. We can't take money off them and give it to people who can't afford to heat their homes. So that's question number one. What are the ideological reasons that are currently driving 10 Downing Street to resist a move that Treasury officials reportedly believe is politically unavoidable? Talk me through the ideological reasons that make number 10, or Boris Johnson and his advisors, believe that they shouldn't do anything like a one-off tax on energy suppliers to help people cope with the cost of living. Question number two is a bit trickier. Question number two focuses upon how much money it's going to raise. I saw a horrible, a few people enjoy Twitter more than I do, but occasionally you do stumble across some of the stuff about the rape allegations yesterday that were being tweeted by quite well-known people, not just Michael Fabricant, but also people who do this for a living, were genuinely staggering. You sort of, I don't know whether it's naivety, but I saw one tweet yesterday as if it was a gotcha. Labour admit in the House of Commons that a windfall tax would only raise about £120 per household, as if that were a gotcha. And again, I thought of indoor coats. It was a teacher's wife, if you remember, in Cromer, who just rang in very matter-of-factly to explain that her and the kids wear indoor coats so that when they go outside, they feel the benefit of their bigger coats. They need to wear a coat inside to keep warm, but if they wore the same coat outside, then it wouldn't provide as much protection against the cold as they need or as they would like. So they've got indoor coats and then they stick another coat on when they go outside. In Britain, in 2022, in a home where the breadwinner is a teacher. Indoor coats. So the second question is, would 120 quid a year make much difference to you? And I wish I didn't have to keep asking questions like this, but as long as elected politicians and professional commentators, broadcasters and journalists keep suggesting, keep towing the line, keep doffing the cap and tugging the forelock to capital, to wealth, I have to keep asking these questions because they keep denying that you exist, or if they admit that you exist, they think it's your fault that you're poor, even if you're a teacher. Or yesterday there was a police officer, wasn't it? I don't know if you saw that at the Police Federation. Gross income of 40 grand. And of course, in the hands of some elements of the right-wing media, that will be turned into an invitation to other people to say, well, I don't know why anyone's feeling sorry for her, I'm much poorer. Because if you can get people to turn on each other, they're never going to look up. Just like the immigration debate all over again. And that is where, almost as if I planned it, this introduction ends. Because it began with a bloke saying, oh, I'm a free marketeer. But obviously, if my sector needs help from the government, then the government should jolly well give it immediately. And do you remember in the immediate aftermath of Brexit, and people would ring up, and in tears quite often, talking about friends, family members, colleagues who'd voted to abolish freedom of movement because there were too many immigrants. And they'd say, but I'm one of those people. I remember one woman talking about her own mother-in-law, said, I am one of that. And they all said, oh, no, we didn't mean you. We didn't mean you. Those are the ideological reasons, aren't they? We're in favour of something for reasons we don't really understand until we actually encounter the reality of it, and then we're not in favour of it at all. So I'm in favour of a free market until my sector needs help, and then I think it should get help from the government. I'm in favour of abolishing freedom of movement until it actually affects people I know and encounter, at which point, oh no, I didn't mean you. I meant all the ones that Nigel has his little cheese dreams about. I meant the ones in the poster. I didn't mean real people that I actually meet. I meant all the people in the Daily Mail articles. So what are the ideological reasons behind simply, I mean, profit is clean money. It's clear money. It's. I mean, you could say we would reinvest it in R&D, but the head of BP has said actually we wouldn't have done that. It goes into the pockets of shareholders. That's all. Some of whom will be institutional. There might be pension funds and involved in things like that. The numbers are huge. Smack them with a windfall tax. Put 120 quid in every pocket in the country. How can that be something you would ideologically oppose in a time of genuine crisis? That's the crucial condition, a time of genuine crisis. 0345 6060 973. And Labour's plan is actually targeted, so it goes up according to who needs it most. That 120 quid figure is an average, so maybe we'll drop the second question. No, let's not. Let's call it 120 quid, right? That's the sort of bottom line number. And the suggestion is from the kind of people who write op-eds or run hate sites on the internet. The suggestion is that that's such a pittance that it won't make any difference to anybody. Would it make a difference to you? And what are the ideological reasons that prevent Boris Johnson and his closest advisors from taking money from the richest companies on the planet and giving a few quid to people who are currently choosing between heating and eating, or already going without both. What are the ideological reasons? I quite like this one. There aren't any, James. It's just that this is from Claire. There aren't any ideological reasons, James. It's just the fact that Keir Starmer thought of it first. And you certainly got that impression at PMQs yesterday, that a U-turn is almost certainly on the way. And I didn't we go viral 6 months ago with the list of all the U-turns they'd already undertaken? It's one of those little things that's dropped out the back of the colander that passes for my brain. I can't remember all of the U-turns, but there've been so many, I might have to swat up on that. So there's probably another one coming, and obviously what prevents them from doing it sooner is the fear that it would be perceived as somehow buckling to Keir Starmer, as opposed to doing what is surely morally the right thing. 22 after 10. Ed's in Thurrock. Ed, what would you like to say?
I think that the windfall tax, even if it only made £120 for everybody, it's going to make a massive difference to people. I mean, politically, the capital of it is huge. I'm not a Conservative voter. I'm a Green voter, but right. I think that it would show that the government cares about people. Because even a token amount of £120...
If we were to be a little more cynical, it would allow them to pretend for a few moments that they care about people, or to claim that they care.
Yeah, absolutely. I know full well they don't, because the man in charge has no decency, otherwise he would have left after he was admitted breaking the rules that he made.
Yes.
But, that's Boris. And
so what's
Johnson
the political loss?
Just one of those people.
I nearly didn't do this as a phone-in because
there isn't a political loss.
No, well, there must be. Their calculation must be that they lose something if they do it. And I nearly didn't do this as a phone-in because I thought it was a slam dunk. I just thought, well, who could possibly be opposed to it? And then, of course, I remembered the sort of forelock-tugging class of capitalists who think they're on the side of big business, even though they're actually victims of rapacious profiteering. So I thought we'd do it. But politically, what's the downside to this?
Well, the downside is that politically they lose their... We're not going to change. We're going to press forward with our plans to make these companies build renewable fuels, which is great. But the problem is that we won't see the benefit of that for 10, 12 years. By which point, how many people have to, excuse my expression, but how many people have to die? How many people have to starve? How many people have to lose their livelihood so that Johnson can make his point? And I just think that a windfall tax I mean, I fill up my car every day to come to work. And I look at the cost of how much the increase that is now costing me. My family and I, we went down to Devon 3 weeks ago, and it cost us the best part of 260 quid to fill the car up twice.
Yes.
And it's like, well, what the hell? What is going on? We can't keep going down this loss because the government say, we've given you 5p off fuel, and it's like, well, no, you haven't.
Didn't really feel that it was passed along, and it had been overtaken by the wholesale price anyway by the time it landed. Thank you, Ed, and I mean that. What is the political downside for Boris Johnson? I don't know how many of these companies are donors to the Conservative Party, but maybe none of them are, but it may be a little more nuanced than that. So let's make a list of the reasons. So one reason is, what would you do? What are we going to do in October when it goes up again? And to that, I'd say two things. Number one, you've got a fairly clear definition of what a crisis is. So if it wasn't for the fact that costs were so high and profits were so huge, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I'm very conscious of not sounding patronising now, because some people, I think, make these arguments in good faith, even though they are echoes of professionals who are making these arguments in very, very bad faith, whether it is from a lobby group masquerading as a think tank or somebody in the pay of Rupert Murdoch and the rest of them. So, well, what about the magic money tree? So you don't. It's not an infinite thing. If the companies don't have the profits, then you can't put a windfall tax on them, right? And if the customer doesn't have to be shouldering an unbearable burden of pricing, then there's no ideological argument, I would say moral argument, for a windfall tax. So just park that idea that this would be a bad idea now because we might have to do it again in the future. If the conditions are the same in the future, if the profits are comparably enormous and the price for the ordinary consumer is comparably huge, then there would be a case for another windfall tax. But if they're not, then there isn't. And just because I can't fix every window in your house, right, forever, doesn't mean I shouldn't fix the window in the sitting room now, because I've got the glass and I've got the putty. Oh, what's the point in fixing the window in the sitting room? The bathroom's like the Mersey Tunnel. Well, just pause again for a minute. I don't want to patronise you, because I know how much effort is put into pouring this nonsense into your brains. Just pause for a minute and think about it. If it was your house and you're sitting in the sitting room and you've got the glass and the putty to fix that window, would you do it, or would you just leave it because the bathroom window's broken as well? Yeah, so those don't work as arguments. The magic money tree, or we'd do it this year, we'd have to do it next year. If the conditions are the same, then the case for a windfall tax can be made again. If the conditions are not the same, then it can't. And you don't not do something good. You don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Adam's in Manchester. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I just want to state before I start that I am a Tory member, but that doesn't mean that I'm biased in any way.
Well, of course it does.
Well, no, it doesn't.
Well, of course it does.
No, Tories can be independent, just like Labour people can be independent.
But you're a member. You've paid money to sign up to it.
£3 a month. It's hardly influential, is it? Really?
Well, it would make a difference to you if you were struggling to feed your kids, mate.
No, but
anyway, you are biased, but not necessarily in a bad way. You obviously are. You're a fully paid-up member of a political party. There's no better definition of bias than that. And I appreciate you might not agree with them about. You might not agree with them about everything.
Independent views. Let me speak, please. People can have independent views, despite the fact that they can
give money to a party punting a political platform.
Doesn't mean that the bias, James.
All right, tell me why you rang in.
Disagree.
Tell me why you rang in.
I rang in to disagree with you on two fundamental points.
Yeah.
One about the windfall tax and one about you constantly deriding practical solutions that MPs are offering without the need for extra taxation or legislation.
What's your favourite? The value food or the get a better paid job?
Well, I think both of them are practical solutions.
Yeah, but what's your favourite?
I've managed to do both.
So you think people in this country who are struggling to eat?
I'm disabled, and I'm in a vulnerable state.
People in this country who are struggling. Adam, mate, you have to.
And I also managed to find more hours.
Adam,
and also shop around.
Adam.
James, you're shouting over people. You're not letting people speak.
No, I'm trying to literally ask you some questions.
Okay.
That's how this works. That's why this is the most popular. This is the most popular talk show in the history of commercial radio in the United Kingdom. So you'll forgive me for not taking lessons from you in how to present it. Is that okay?
You still talk over people.
Yes, I've just told you it's the most popular show ever in this country.
I'm sure.
So you'll forgive me for not taking lessons from you in how to present it. Is that all right?
That's fine. But
okay. The other thing is now you've got no, because you've only got 33 seconds left now, Adam, because you haven't paused for breath since you came on. So I'll ask you one more question, and hopefully you'll be able to answer it. Stop talking about me and tell me how it would be that someone who's struggling to eat is unaware of value range products in a supermarket.
Nobody's saying that they are unaware, but
so why would you? They are, mate.
Sometimes people choose not to buy.
Adam, you're lying now.
And I'm not lying.
George Eustace spoke from a position. You're doing it again. You're talking over me, Adam. You're so biased, Adam. You're so biased, mate. But at least you got £3 a month to send to the Conservatives. George Eustace came from the position of telling people, have you thought of buying value food? And Adam, mate, get off your knees. Seriously, these people don't care about you. Have a look at what they've done to support for disabled people since 2010. These people are picking your pocket while you're bending the knee. It's pathetic, man. It really is. And that's why you have to keep shouting. That's why you have to keep talking. That's why you can't let me speak to you. Because when I do, when that mirror appears in front of you and you see what's in that mirror, you feel so silly that you can't even pause for breath. And now you've used up all the time that was available because Holly Harris is here with the headlines. What are the ideological reasons behind the resistance to the windfall tax? Rishi Sunak doesn't have them. The Treasury apparently accept the politically unavoidable nature of this move, but the Prime Minister's advisers are blocking the Treasury. Why? What's the downside to this? And unless you are the Chief Executive of Shell, or unless you do have enormous investments in petrochemical companies, then the question needs to involve, what's the political downside for you? How do you lose out? Why is it bad for you, this windfall tax? Okay? So I can just about see how, if you're going to have to pause the purchase of the new Lamborghini for 6 months, then it might be bad for you, the windfall tax. But I mean you. I don't mean him or her. I mean you. I mean Adam, the last caller. Why would this be bad for you in terms of ideology or just in terms of simple economic impact? 0345 6060 973. David is in Richmond. David, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I'd like to say it's a question of total ideology, because obviously...
What's the ideology? What is the ideology?
Right-wing conservatism believes 100,000% that you look after yourself, you look after your family, and, excuse me, my French, sod the rest. And that is why they were against it, not because they know economically it makes sense to give everyone money and keep everyone happy in a very limited way and show that they're caring, but it really rubs against them. So George Eustace...
But the odd thing... sorry to interrupt you. The odd thing is that the last election campaign was very much fought. The whole levelling up agenda is very much fought on the notion that we're going to help you, isn't it? The whole message to the so-called Red Wall was that you're going to get special treatment. You're going to get. We're going to stop looking after those, those cosseted snowflakes in the southeast and in London, and you need help. So people don't mind being told that they need help in some contexts,
but they haven't actually done it.
No, I know. Hey, details, David. Don't be such a party pooper. They intended to, or they told people they were going to get it, and people voted for it. So it's a bit more nuanced than you allow. How come, like our last caller doesn't, he fits, I think, very much into the category you describe. I don't need any help, therefore nobody else does either. And yet, the party he pays £3 a month to got elected in 2019 on the back of literally promising to help poor areas level up.
Because it did, because obviously the neglect of the previous 4 or 5 years, but also Corbyn was a major issue, much more than perhaps you're giving credence to.
You mean by putting people off?
Yeah, he put normal people off. That was the thing. He put everyone off.
You've just set fire to my inbox, which is already pretty inflamed. But people are not ready to admit that yet. It's funny.
No,
I never met a Conservative who wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be replaced as leader of the Labour Party, and that for me is the beginning and the end of the point that you've just made. But many people, and they're generally very aggressive. I don't know whether you found that, but they seem to be absolutely still committed to the opposite view. So you're saying that the levelling up agenda was less of a player than the anti-Corbyn vote? I don't know.
Yeah, if they had the equivalent of Tony Blair, not Tony Blair himself, but a new Tony Blair, and then not a Starmer, they would have won.
Maybe. I'm going to disagree with you on that. Partly because I think it's important to disagree with everybody, but also because you haven't mentioned the B word, and the big con, of course, was persuading people A, that it would be a good thing, and B, that he was going to get it done. Both of which have now fallen apart like the cheapest of suits. But of course, some people aren't ready to see that yet. 10:38 is the time. Thank you, David. Samina is in Tooting. Samina, the ideology here. What's the political downside of doing it? What do you think?
Yes, well, hi, James. So for me, the political downside is simply that it was suggested by the Labour Party. They'll be reminded of it if they implement it in sort of elections.
Well, they could just call it something else. They could just go peak Boris Johnson and call your phone. There's something wrong with your phone. I don't know what's happened to your phone. It sounds terrible. What are you doing?
It's the same thing, though, isn't it, James?
I don't know, but I can't bear that. We'll have to try and improve your phone line. I do apologise. Chris is in Newcastle. They could call it something else. They don't call it the windfall tax. They could call it the... what have you got, Chris?
So I think, James, that the reason why they don't want to do the windfall tax is because it breaks the narrative of a successful economy. So a number of weeks ago, Boris Johnson said, there's no inflation. It's all a bit of a press thing. They're talking it up. No, we've got 9% inflation. Interestingly, inflation...
He still was yesterday. I mean, there comes a point where you wonder how close to the emperor's buttocks a person's nose has to be before they can acknowledge his nakedness. But he still was trying yesterday to sort of claim... I think our inflation is the highest in the G7, so that's world-beating, isn't it? And yet, yeah, I think you might be on to... But then the Chancellor's in favour of it, and the Chancellor is also keen to portray the British economy as performing rather well, I think.
Yes. So I think, I'm in the kitchen at the minute looking at loads of all those parents out there whose kids have got exams at the moment, things stuck on walls. So my youngest has got A-level economics next week.
Gosh.
And there's a drawing of an oligopoly on the wall.
Go on.
And it talks about an oligopoly being relatively few firms having high barriers to entry. So that sounds like oil companies.
Yes.
And in this drawing, it's got something called a supernormal profit. So when you have the graph going in a particular way for certain circumstances, oligopolies create a supernormal profit, which is what the Treasury will understand, which Sunak will understand. And if you have a supernormal profit, it's an opportunity to have a windfall tax. And Thatcher did that in the past. They did a windfall tax. So it must be down to just how Boris and his advisors want to do the narrative. Somehow we're different.
Yeah, I think that's more flesh on the bones than I've managed to provide today. I don't know that I've signed up completely to it, but there would be, because they're so good, or he is personally so good at just claiming black is white and up is down, and, you know, parliamentary standards don't matter. I mean, do you see what I mean? I don't think he'd pause. I don't think he'd draw breath before claiming that the windfall tax is proof that the economy is doing very well. The very fact that we could turn to these companies and demand that they put their hands in their pockets to help out good old British, patriotic British people is evidence of my strong leadership and indeed of the robustness of the world, of the British economy. Do you see what I mean? He could talk utter twaddle, and I think plenty of people who are definitely not biased would swallow it. But, yeah, I mean, it would... You're suggesting even for him that would be hard to sell?
Yes, because I think he just has constantly pushed this narrative of Brexit's been very successful, the economy is very successful, we did the economy better for COVID.
So if anything he said in the last 2 years is true, there is absolutely no case for a windfall tax. So it's more rhetorical than ideological. It's more that they're resisting it for rhetorical reasons rather than ideological reasons. But I love that phrase. I wish I'd done an economics A-level, not just for the reasons that I shared with you at the top of the show yesterday, but the supernormal profits and the oligopoly sound very similar to what Martin Lewis was getting so cross about on Monday's show, don't they? Do you remember when he was talking about what Ofgem have done in order to make it harder for us to shop around and to protect the biggest companies and presumably their profits, when really he believes, and I'm inclined to agree with him, that their job should be to prioritise the consumer over the profits of the big energy suppliers. So what's in it for them, though? This is when I sound very naive. Why would it be politically damaging for Boris Johnson to put a windfall tax on massive energy companies? I mean, he's not expecting to go and work for BP when he's finished or anything like that. What? I mean, you can't libel anybody, and I wouldn't want you to. But what is the quid pro quo here? I know one former energy minister went off to work for a Russian who's subsequently being sanctioned, and I can see the quid pro quo there, getting paid millions and millions of pounds to lobby and act for the head of an energy company, whether it's a corrupt kleptocrat or not, that owns the company, whether it's shareholders or an individual Putin apologist. It doesn't matter, does it? You're getting paid millions of pounds, and you can quiet the more you're getting paid, the easier it is to quieten your conscience. But take Boris Johnson, just one man, one politician. I don't want a windfall tax on energy companies because... What's his reason? You're going to have to do better than Chris. I wonder if you can. I don't want an energy tax. I don't want a windfall tax on energy companies because it will make it even harder for me to pretend that our economy is going great guns when it simply isn't. We'll try Samina again. Hopefully her phone line has improved. Samina, hello.
Can you hear me now?
Very well.
Hi.
What would you like? Where were we?
So my point was about that it's the narrative. If they go for the windfall tax, or the old Labour suggested this, and Labour can then use that in future. You know, in the next few months' narrative that the government listened to us. They hate listening to any ideas from the opposition. Remember,
but they can claim it for their own.
Living wage, they changed it from the minimum wage and claimed it themselves. And then the other bit, James, just quickly, is the embarrassment. Right. So Andrew Bailey came on the other day and said, we can't control what's going on in Ukraine. And my point is that the Bank of England, Treasury, have hundreds and hundreds of people, analysts and economists, modelling all these scenarios 6-8 months ahead, a year ahead. They'll have factored all this in. So they would have known that inflation was going up.
Yes, we played Boris Johnson yesterday from last October, sort of denying it and dismissing it and all that kind of thing. But the I've got some. I mean, no one is clairvoyant.
Yeah.
Are they? I mean, no. I mean, you could have the best economists in the world, and they're still going to get taken by surprise by things. So. At the Bank of England also...
But they're building scenarios, James. They're saying if this happens, this will happen. If it goes by X%, Y will happen.
Yes, they do.
They had months to plan all this, the government, and to help people out, and they left it all last minute.
Yeah, well, that's Boris Johnson in a nutshell, isn't
and
it?
this thing about investing, Rishi last night saying, I want you lot, the BPs, etc., shells of this world, to start investing. The point that your caller made earlier, that's 10, 12 years away. It's trickle-down economics. It's not going to help people now in the next 3 months or the next 6 months.
No, so it is the fear of how it would make them look. This is a variation on Chris's theme, although to be fair to you were up first, but just that Chris pushed in because your phone line was so poor. Yeah. It's a fear of how it will make them look and how it will undermine the ludicrous narrative, which is very Brexity, isn't it? Don't look over here, look over there. Things aren't going really badly at all. They're going brilliantly. You just need to believe more. And a windfall tax kind of blows a hole in that. And it has Keir Starmer's fingerprints all over it, whether they like it or not. Back to, if anyone can remember, the major question of the moment, which is, what are the ideological reasons and what would the political downside be of a windfall tax that pretty much the world and his wife think is a very good idea, unless, of course, you're tugging your forelock so hard that you've just fallen over. Adam's in Uxbridge. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello.
Hi, I work as a utilities manager for a company in central London, meaning I sort of manage the bills effectively for our utilities.
Okay.
And actually sort of having looked at this situation for the last couple of months, both from a personal perspective, sort of residentially myself at home,
yes,
and from a commercial work perspective, I'm struggling, to be completely honest with you, to find a justification sort of to keep things ticking along as they are, whether it's through a sort of windfall tax or some other tax, or just call it something fancy, just sort of for the Conservative Party sort of to be able to tick that box of saying we've done this. I genuinely think something needs to happen. As on a personal perspective, before sort of moving commercially, where I've seen an increase sort of from just under £100 a month in my utility bills to just north of £200. That's basically a 100% increase between the 31st of March this year
and then you factor in, £13.5 million pay package for the boss of Shell. Some of the investors are cross about that because they want the money for themselves. They don't want the money to be linked back to customers. 6.2 billion. Hang on, I need to get this out. I should have done this sooner. I do apologise. It's very unprofessional of me. The energy giant, this is BP, first 3 months of this year, an underlying profit of $6.2 billion, while, you can pay your heating bill even if it is rising exponentially. There are people listening to this programme who can't. And the justification is based upon circumstances and conditions. When X is, less than Y and A is greater than B, then we do this supernormal profit levy or windfall tax or whatever you want to call it. And you can't, working in the sector and also looking at your bills at home, you can't think of a reason why they'd still be resisting it.
No, and again, from that ideological perspective, because if we sort of track back to 2019, where it was the Conservative Party who then sort of made that promise to all those communities up north specifically, where we'll be the party of the masses, we'll be the party of the people. Actually, I'm struggling to think of one evidence or one sort of shred of evidence over the last 3 or 4 years that I can point to and say, actually, the Conservative Party have been able to meet those promises and actually be the party of the people. And
he got Brexit done. He got Brexit done, Adam. Pay attention.
That's so sort of last year type of narrative now.
Yes.
And regardless of where once it's sort of on.
He got all the big calls right. He got all the big calls right. Don't mention the care homes. Don't mention the care homes.
Again, this is what I mean. If you look at the bank of evidence available for the last couple of years, there's nothing that says that the Conservative Party has been the party of the masses. Now, sort of just to take you back to the original question, from an ideological perspective,
yes,
I think politics obviously there's quite a bit of politics sort of about optics and the way things look, and I think the Conservative Party have sort of placed themselves as the company of big business, and the sort of blind hope that successful big business then equals a better economy for the UK, which then equals sort of a better living standard for the general population within the UK. But actually, again, I'm struggling to find a shred of evidence for the last 12, 13 years of sort of conservative rule across the UK that says actually that
well, you put me in I'm not going to reach for my memory banks, but I accept your analysis from 2019. I think that between 2010 and 2019 that they were a different beast entirely. You may not like them, you may not approve of them, but they were certainly... Well, OK, I'll give you an example of something they delivered on. David Cameron said they'd have a referendum on leaving the European Union, and they did. I'm not offering that up as good news or as something that is to be welcomed either at the time or retrospectively, but it proves that they have delivered on some of the stuff that they said they would deliver on. But the rhetoric since 2019 has been very much of the emperor's not naked. How dare you say so? How dare you say that the emperor... Quick, look over there. There's a rabbit. Look, a rabbit. Quick, there. Look. No. Yes, a rabbit.